country with a billion people aspiring and working towards change every single day in our fast paced lives. The average Indian is young, dynamic, and looking for solutions or answers at each step. If there were an answer to finding out where the future of our country lies, it would be by talking to these young change makers building the blocks of our future. Welcome to a brand new series, Youth for Change by My Take. And I'm Raghav. And for the first episode, we have two very special guests, both passionate about a sustainable future and acting as drivers of change in their respective domains.
Our first guest is Manan Mehta, the co-founder of Solar Ladder. Manan has been spearheading his startup that aims at democratization of green energy by enabling solar installation companies through software. Solar Ladder has been successful in acquiring grants from the Y Combinator Startup School and London School of Economics Generate program. Our other guest for this episode is Ishan Sharma, a filmmaker and storyteller with expertise in delivering wildlife and nature stories. Ishan's films have won multiple awards at film festivals abroad and in India. His focus has been filming rural communities in central India and Himalayas with a focus on wildlife conservation.
My first question to the both of you today is, what do you think have been the perks and perils of starting your own ventures at such an early age?
So I would definitely say that the perils are a lot more than the perks at this stage. But coming to, I'll give you the good news first in terms of the perks. So we get a lot of, so I think there's a lot of support in the renewable energies community, and also in terms of like it's I don't think it's one of those industries where they see that somebody who's probably like 23, 24 years of age has just started a company and they're not ready to support them because they feel they are inexperienced.
Correct.
There is a lot of support from the community in the sense that they know that this is the energy of the future, so they do enable people to like younger people to take up owners of this particular industry. And I think perils for us personally, and especially, is the fact that we jumped into this entire field ourselves without having any background in it.
That is very interesting, and I'm sure Ishan has some similarities and differences in the same when he was getting into the space of wildlife exploration and filmmaking.
Sometimes I'm alone filming conflict where there's a human tiger conflict, or like conflict between poachers and this community who wants to protect wildlife. You are on that edge, or you're on that very thin line where anything can happen. For example, one day a lady was obviously mauled by a tiger. She died on spot. I was there now and this is Maharashtra I'm talking about, and near Nagpur. What happened, all of them actually, so they stopped me, and that time I didn't even have my camera, but they knew that there is a person who is working with forest department, but I was not. I was working on my project with National Geographic, and they stopped me and they told me that we'll let you go if the PCCF, which is the state's highest authority in forest, comes over here and takes away all the tiger of this landscape. So and this is one, and when I was in Manipur, I was actually kidnapped by an Naxalite. So the areas where I work in, these areas are pretty dominant by a lot of hostile, groups, which are, because if there is conflict, then there is one part of the whole rural community who wants the tigers to go away or elephants to go away. And then you have to actually go there as a person who look different to them, cannot speak their language, and have to tell them that I just want to record your story so that we can find some alternate solution other than killing tigers or relocating tigers, which is not sustainable on every ground which we are talking about.
What connects both these stories, I feel, is a higher purpose and meaning that actually drives both of you to wake up the next day and work towards the environment and towards a sustainable future. Manan, the next question I have for you is, since even you spoke about clean tech is something which is only slowly coming up in India, what do you think, what kind of change in the Indian education system do you feel could encourage entrepreneurship in the sustainable domain?
So just to draw a little bit of points from what Ishan said, you know, he's had, since man is a product of nature and nurture, I think for Ishan, it was both that led him to wildlife conservation, since he was growing up in an area where, he had that exposure to to wildlife, and he was able to see that conflict between the communities and the wildlife. Whereas I feel that exact exposure is what is needed in the education system for us to be more aware of what's going on in the world. During my university life, I was very fortunate to be doing a lot of like volunteering experiences, which led me to believe that I want to work in maybe like say the governmental organization or a few NGOs. And I did try my hand on them, but what I realized is that what the education system did not prepare me for was like so there's a structure to every organization that really affects your ability to make an impact within that organization or through that organization. So those kind of things you do not learn when you are like in school or in college. I think that is definitely one very important thing that the education system should have, which is, like making them realize that how and when you start making an impact when you're working in organizations or when you do work in an organization, and what's the level of impact that you make.
And to add on to the point of how education system works in India, for example, like the field of we used to have environmental sciences. I guess all of us have given those exams, where we know we should draw that diagram of global warming. So but you know what, it's not interactive. It's one of the module which you can show on everyday basis, but it just like either the teachers don't have they don't have, the schools, the education system don't have the capacity to talk about such thing. And like for example, there is this new so for example, like the whole environmental sector, where it is wildlife, clean energy, sustainability, early exposure, like that schooling phase is really important, because I saw a lot of my friends, even they were out in wilderness, they are right now working in different factories, or they are engineers and all these things. And so my point is, we all got exposed to the same thing. Obviously, I tried to, as he was saying, build my bridges towards the areas which I wanted to explore. But a lot of my friends now are coming to me saying that how can we come into the field, and now they have so many doubts because they are in a very good pay scale and they want to change their sector. And environment that way is not a interesting, you do not get handsomely paid in this field. The problem is because obviously because there is the exposure to this field is so less. And in countries like India, where for example a lot of like for example UK, a lot of companies are coming up with positions which for example National Geographic has a position for people who can check their impact on the planet. So just imagine Nat Geo Society, who's a society who's working towards exploration. They have a small team of people who check on their impact, on their carbon footprint. Every company can have someone like this, people who have understanding of biochemistry, on gas emission, and people like him who have so interesting of tapping solar energy. So my point is that education system has to become a little more diverse and little more more interactive, because science is already there, but we are not making it interactive. And because of this COVID, the scope of that has already shrunk to bits and pieces. So I guess we have for him I guess clean energy again, I guess we are really far behind other countries, I guess.
Coming to the question that Ishan has asked about whether India is far behind on clean energy in clean energy or not. So there are two ways of looking at it. One in terms of absolute size and other in terms of relative proportions. So if we look at the absolute size of clean energy investments that are coming into India, it's a lot. Like we are in terms of in solar, we are the third largest in the world after the US and China. Whereas in relative proportion, yes, we do have a lot of work to do because of the size of the country that we are in. which is, I think, a great opportunity for the youths to explore. So every single audio, like every single viewer of this forum, like my take, is it's like a call to action that even though clean energy is the third largest in the world, like in solar energy is the third largest in the world right now, there's still just, I think, around 10% of the electricity mix that comes from solar. And our goals are such that I think the we have to reach 50% of a renewable mix by 2030. So that gives a lot of scope. So the answer to your question is yes and no. India is like large in terms of the potential. Like it has done a very good job. And but the thing is that it's also like a lot. We have a lot to do before we really get to the goals.
I would like to come back to Ishan and talk about these communities that you worked on in central India and the Himalayas, who themselves don't have a single clue about what a carbon footprint is, but are themselves going through a downfall as to how they live and how they have been living in these particular forests because of the depletion of the same.
So why I focus my work on these communities is because in smaller communities, anger mostly doesn't turn into fear, but anger turns into outrage, and outrage results in poaching, right? Poaching in a sense, and it's not poaching through armor, which is, for example, when you poach with a gun, when someone, they have a specific mindset that they'll kill one and they have to come back. But when the aggression is so hostile that a father has lost a daughter, or a wife has lost his husband, they what they do, they poison a cattle, they kill a cattle and poison it. And it's not just one animal who feasts on it. See, so a tiger will eat it, and then a leopard will eat it, even porcupines nib on the bones. So you see that you lose generation of animals in that smaller patch of areas. So why my work is to actually bring out the my most of my focus is to bring out aggression of communities on platforms where people can talk about, and the organization who wants to help these who wants to aid the communities, or find solutions to conflict, can actually get enough funding. And it's easier for someone like me because I am backed by National Geographic. But there are so many interesting colleagues of mine who are doing really honest journalism, wildlife and nature journalism. It's just that they lack that platform. And when we have so many tribal communities around the world, and obviously in India, and most of them do not have a channel to communicate their struggles. And now second is the dependency towards forest is what which leads to conflict, because if you leave communities to fend for themselves, where they have to go inside the forest for wood collection, for food, animals are also there, right? Like, and in India, sloth bear is one of the grumpiest animal who's there in central India mostly. So like every year in Madhya Pradesh, which is my state, around 90 to 100 people lose their lives because of sloth bears. And people who do not lose their lives, who are just mauled or scratched, sloth bears have these big claws, just for the reference. So their life is pretty paralytic, and it's not a good life to live. So my point is, to reduce this dependency, we have to provide them alternate livelihood. I don't know how communication works, but sometimes if your stories hit the right platform, the amount of fundings which we receive is really interesting, and the kind of work which I have been doing with communities over here is mostly more dialogue centric, where we can actually bring it to government. So I have been continuously talking to all the departments, and not just forest departments, so agriculture department, Manrega, so that that if there is any scheme, I can note it down and make sure that the community has aid towards it.
Now, talking about this diverse population and about how we are ultimately a country of 1 billion people, my next question is towards Manan. Talk about how Solar Ladder has one of its key principles is democratization of green energy. Can you tell me how the democratization of green energy would turn out in a country of 1 billion people? And you already spoke about how already the electricity output through solar panels is just 10%, whereas the goals are way higher, projected towards 2030.
Solar is the next big internet in terms of decentralization and in terms of like the potential of this industry is going to be the biggest thing that we in our lifetimes are going to experience, whether that be in terms of business volume it's going to generate, employment it is going to generate, or even how omnipresent solar is going to become in the coming few decades. The major reason being that the power of solar is that it is one of the only viable decentralized forms of energy. So our main aim should be to get rid of these transmission lines and the heavy grids that we see that is transmitting electricity all throughout the country. Solar, if rooftop solar can see its the most amount of potential that it has, then it has the capability of us really reducing the grid infrastructure that we depend upon. And that is important because the grid infrastructure that we work with right now has about, like, in terms of losses from the point of generation to the point of consumption, has about 10 to 15% of losses. And this is it does not make sense, like if you were to deploy capital in making the grids more efficient, or if you have to deploy that capital in putting more rooftop solar. I would say that the latter is a more viable future that we should be able to see, because it gives us a more energy independent state for us to be in. And the other thing is that India has a lot of potential to become a leader in this particular industry, because of the amount of, like, we are blessed with the resource of the free resource of sunlight there is, and we should really tap into that in order to become how right now we have the OPEC nations, which are very rich in oil. India has, with the low costs of solar panels and the low cost of labor, and also abundant sunlight, we have the power to become one of the leading nations when it comes to solar.
Every industry has their own problems and footprints. The point is how we are like, the whole agenda of this conversation is to talk about the sustainability part of it, right? And can we sustain this current model of solar? We can obviously debate over it and we can try to find solutions. It's just that if somebody who wants to, if somebody takes something away from this conversation, should be, yes, solar is good, but we just have to be conscious. Like, this is what I was saying.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is very important in this. Sorry, just
go ahead.
So, like, as humans, we are very self-centered. Like our humanity is very self-centered in the sense that we only think about, what are the cost benefits that we are going to make. Ishan, the kind of work that you're doing is basically giving a voice and bringing other wildlife communities into the same pedestal as us, so that we also start thinking about their cost benefits rather than just how much we are going to save in electricity costs, or vice versa.
On the same note, the first thing Ishan asked me when I told him that I would like to invite you to a show and we have an entrepreneur with us, the first thing he asked me was, does he fund any film projects or does he have a CSR fund to film some of his wildlife?
I can myself right now.
Just to come back to our conversation, I think if I had to summarize it in 3 words, it would be collective conscious action that all of us are working towards. Ishan as a wildlife explorer, filmmaker, and Manan as an ecological entrepreneur. Thank you so much, Manan and Ishan, for such a wonderful conversation around your efforts to this problem of climate change that plagues not only one, but all of us. We have Manan battling the same by bringing in technology and software to change the manner in which we consume energy. And Ishan from the ground, living amongst forests, capturing each and every detail of what actually goes around in the wilderness. I hope you enjoyed this episode and catch us next week again on our YouTube channel. That is My Take, My with a double Y. And don't forget to follow our other social media handles as well.